If you hear laughter at night in the corners of this small town, don't follow it. No matter how curious or frightened you are, just ignore it. Because it's not the laughter of children playing, but the screams of a lost soul, a little child who died in a very tragic way. She will call to you from the darkness, guiding you into an abyss of endless nightmares. Graysonville, a small town in northern America, is always quiet at night. Streets that were once bustling are now deserted, lit only by flickering street lights. The sound of crickets dominates the night, and only a few dare to go outside after dark. They know this town holds a dark secret, a legend that's never spoken of but always lingers in their minds. Rachel had just moved to Graysonville with her family. They chose a house on the outskirts of town that had been vacant for a long time. The house was large, dusty, and had a charm from the past. But Rachel's first night there quickly turned into a nightmare. As the clock struck midnight, a sound came from outside her bedroom window. A small laugh, like that of a little girl. Soft and high-pitched. Rachel woke up, cold sweat dripping down her back. Her heart pounded, and even though she didn't want to believe it, the sound came again. This time clearer, closer. "Did you hear that, Mom?" Rachel asked with a trembling voice, but there was no answer. The house was too quiet, with only that laugh echoing. Then, suddenly, everything fell silent. Rachel hesitantly pulled back the curtain from her window. What she saw outside made her jump. A little girl was standing in the middle of the yard, wearing a dirty, torn white dress. Her hair was disheveled, covering most of her face. But the most terrifying part was the wide smile stretched across her pale face. The girl's eyes were hollow, sunken, as if she hadn't been alive for a long time. Rachel rubbed her eyes, thinking it was just a hallucination. But when she opened them again, the girl was still standing there, watching her with that eerie smile. Then, the girl laughed, a laugh that sounded like a scream from another world. A laugh filled with hatred and revenge. Rachel froze, her body unable to turn away from the figure. Suddenly, the house lights went out. Pitch darkness consumed the room, and the sound of laughter grew closer. It was as if the girl was already inside, slowly stepping towards her bedroom. The next morning, Rachel tried to forget what had happened the night before. She blamed it on exhaustion and the stress of moving. However, when she went down to the dining room, something strange awaited her there. Small footprints, clearly visible on the dusty wooden floor, grayish, like the tracks of someone with wet feet. They led from the front door down the hallway toward her room. Rachel held her breath. There was no way a little child had been in the house. With trembling hands, she followed the footprints. Each step deepened her fear. The tracks stopped right in front of her bedroom door. She opened the door slowly, and though the room appeared empty, a sudden coldness gripped her. The air was heavy and oppressive, as if something invisible was watching her. The sound of the child's laughter came again, this time softer, like a whisper in her ear. "Do you want to play with me?" Rachel stumbled backward in panic, falling and nearly crashing into a bookshelf behind her. Her head spun. This couldn't be real. But the voice, the laughter, was too clear, too real. She ran out of her room, heading for the kitchen, find her mother. But her mother wasn't there. The house felt empty, no sound, just a suffocating silence. Rachel began to panic. Where was her family? Why was no one answering? That's when she realized something horrifying. The little girl wasn't just a ghost haunting the house. She was after Rachel, wanting more than just to scare her. She wanted Rachel to play with her. Forever. In the days that followed, Rachel saw the girl more and more. Sometimes in the window, sometimes at the end of the hallway, sometimes in the backyard as night fell. The figure was always the same, a torn white dress, tangled hair hiding her face, and that relentless laughter. One night, Rachel tried covering her ears with a pillow, hoping the laughter would stop. But even as she pressed her ears shut, the laughter echoed in her head, louder and more terrifying. You can't run from me, Rachel. You will play with me. Rachel began to feel that the girl was manipulating her mind. The laughter wasn't coming from outside, but from within her own head. A silent scream that made her feel like she was going mad. She tried to find out more about the house they had just moved into. Through brief conversations with neighbors, she learned that the house had been vacant for years. The family that lived there before suddenly moved out, without explanation. But there was one story that made Rachel's blood run cold. Several years ago, a little girl named Lily had been reported missing in the area. The search lasted for months, but no trace of her was ever found. Some believed she had been kidnapped, while others said she drowned in the river near town. But one rumor continued to circulate, though it was never proven. Some people said that Lily was still here, but no longer as a human. Rachel became increasingly convinced that what was haunting her was Lily's spirit, trapped between worlds. But why had Lily chosen her? Why wouldn't this ghost leave her alone? That night, as Rachel struggled to sleep, a strange dream came to her. In the dream, she was in a dark forest, walking toward the sound of Lily's laughter. In the middle of the forest, she found a large stone circle. Inside the circle, Lily stood, calling her. Suddenly, the scene changed. Lily was no longer an innocent little girl. Her face transformed into something terrifying, her skin pale like a corpse, her eyes hollow, and her wide smile revealing broken teeth. Rachel was shocked, but she couldn't move. Her legs felt heavy, as if held by an unseen force. You have to play with me, Rachel, Lily whispered in a chilling voice. Or I will play with your family. Rachel woke up screaming. Cold sweat drenched her body, and at the foot of her bed, small footprints covered in dirt began to appear. The next day, Rachel could no longer suppress the fear that haunted her. She decided to seek help from the elders in Graysonville, hoping they knew more about what was really happening in the house she now lived in. She went to the town's old, dusty library, a place rarely visited by locals. There, an elderly librarian named Mrs. Wilkins, known for her knowledge of the town's history, worked. Rachel approached her anxiously, but her determination to find answers overcame her fear. After some brief pleasantries, Rachel got straight to the point. Mrs. Wilkins, do you know anything about a child named Lily? She went missing years ago, and I feel something strange is happening in my house. I keep seeing the figure of a little girl who, Before Rachel could finish her sentence, Mrs. Wilkins interrupted, a sudden look of terror crossing her face. "Lily, oh, God, don't tell me you're living in the old Barker family house." Rachel nodded slowly, and instantly, Mrs. Wilkins' face turned pale. "You need to leave that place as soon as possible. It's no longer a place for the living." Rachel felt her heart pounding. "What do you mean? What happened there?" With a trembling voice, Mrs. Wilkins began her story. Lily was the daughter of the Barker family who used to live in that house. But something was wrong with that child. People said she liked to play alone in the woods, talking to something no one else could see. One night, she went out and never came back. A search was conducted, but all they found was her wet white dress at the edge of the river. Some said she drowned, but her body was never found. Rachel listened intently, but what came out of Mrs. Wilkins' mouth next sent chills down her spine. "Lily never truly left, Rachel. Her spirit is trapped there, between life and death. She's waiting for someone to keep her company. You must be careful because if you can't resist, she will drag you into the same darkness." Rachel was silent, frozen by what she had just heard. As if all the pieces began to connect, the laughter at night, the figure of the little girl constantly following her, the wet footprints in her house. But what could she do? How could she escape the spirit of a child that haunted her? Before Rachel left, Mrs. Wilkins grabbed her hand tightly, her eyes filled with fear. "There's one way, but it's very dangerous. You have to return to the place where Lily disappeared. You have to stop her there." After Mrs. Wilkins' warning, Rachel knew she had no other choice. If Lily's spirit grew stronger, her family could also be in danger. She had to do something before it was too late. Armed with a flashlight and an old notebook, Mrs. Wilkins had given her a book containing ancient rituals to banish spirits. Rachel prepared to face the darkness that had long haunted Graysonville. That night, Rachel returned to the place where Lily had disappeared, a river that flowed quietly on the outskirts of town. The air around the river felt colder than usual, and the faint sound of children's laughter echoed among the trees. The tall trees surrounding the river seemed like lurking shadows, adding to the ominous atmosphere. Rachel stared at the calm water below her, imagining how Lily could have fallen into the current. Yet, nothing appeared wrong with the place. It was just an ordinary river on a dark night. However, as Rachel prepared to perform the ritual from the notebook, the air suddenly shifted. The temperature dropped sharply, causing frost to form on the grass. The laughter now grew louder, more sinister. And from the shadows of the trees, Lily's figure emerged. Her torn and dirty dress fluttered in the night wind, and a terrifying smile was etched on her face. "Lily," Rachel whispered, trying to suppress her trembling. "What do you want from me?" Lily's figure stepped slowly toward Rachel, without a sound, only laughter echoing around her. Suddenly, Lily stopped right at the edge of the river, her gaze empty but filled with hatred. "I want you to play with me," she replied, her voice sounding like the combined voices of 1,000 children, chilling and inhuman. Rachel knew she had to act fast. She opened the notebook and began reciting the incantation written within. The ancient words echoed in the stillness of the night, but Lily showed no signs of stopping. Instead, the terrifying laughter turned into a scream filled with rage. "You can't escape me," Lily screamed, her voice shattering the night's silence. Her body began to change, her skin turned even paler, her hair more disheveled, and her eyes hollow like dark voids. Rachel continued reading the incantation, despite her growing fear. She could feel Lily's presence growing closer, the cold air wrapping around her body. The ground around them trembled, and dark shadows began rising from the river, as if something was emerging from its depths. Lily's scream now morphed into a sorrowful wail, and other spirits seemed to rise from the water. Rachel was now standing in the center of a circle of swirling spirits. All of these spirits seemed trapped in the same place as Lily's souls, unable to rest, caught between two worlds. Yet, in the midst of the horror, Rachel noticed something. Among the spirits, there was one figure that appeared different, larger, darker. That figure seemed to be the source of the power binding Lily and the other spirits. Rachel felt overwhelming fear, but she also knew this was the moment to end it all. With a trembling voice, Rachel called out Lily's name once more. "Lily, you don't have to be trapped here. Let me help you." Lily's figure stopped moving, and for a moment, her hollow eyes seemed to show deep pain and sadness. However, before Rachel could continue, the dark figure rushed toward Lily, as if trying to hold on to her spirit. Rachel had to act quickly. She reached for the silver necklace in her pocket, a necklace Mrs. Wilkins said could sever the bond between the spirits and the darkness. Bravely, Rachel threw the necklace toward Lily. Instantly, a piercing scream echoed, and the dark shadow shattered into black mist, dissipating into the air. Lily's figure collapsed to her knees, her body beginning to fade. Her once terrifying face now resembled that of a frightened child, far from the menacing ghost that had haunted her. Rachel took Lily's hand, and in a soft voice, said, "You're free now." But before Rachel could feel relieved, Lily whispered in a barely audible voice, "They won't stop. They will come again. For you." Rachel stood frozen, listening to the whisper. Her heart pounded harder. Before she could ask more questions, Lily's figure completely faded away, merging with the cold night wind. The river before her appeared calm again, as if nothing had ever happened. But Lily's final words, "They will come again, for you," echoed in her mind. She staggered backward, feeling a chill that pierced to her bones. The relief she had felt earlier was quickly replaced by an even greater fear. Was it truly over? Or was something worse still lurking, something she didn't yet know about? Rachel turned, gazing at the forest behind her. The tense atmosphere remained strong, even though Lily was no longer there. The large trees surrounding the river stood like silent guardians, holding dark secrets. With every step she took, the dry branches cracked beneath her feet, accompanying the stillness of the night. As Rachel walked back to her house, she recalled Mrs. Wilkins' warning. Could there be something more evil than Lily's spirit? Something unseen, but controlling all the strange events in this small town. That suspicion deepened when she remembered the dark figure she had seen by the river, an entity far more terrifying and powerful than just the spirit of a little girl. When Rachel finally reached her home, she felt something was wrong. The front door, which should have been locked, was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the night breeze. Rachel's heart raced again. Hesitantly, she stepped inside, calling out for her family. "Josh? Sarah?" There was no answer. Rachel walked through the dark hallway, illuminated only by a flickering lamp in the living room. Everything was quiet, too quiet. A strange, unsettling feeling hung in the air, making her breathing feel heavy. When she reached the living room, Rachel sensed a cold presence behind her. She quickly turned, but there was nothing. Just her own shadow stretching across the wall. Yet somehow, Rachel felt as if she were being watched from the dark corners of the room, from behind the windows, from every place her eyes couldn't directly see. Rachel stared at the large mirror hanging on the living room wall. For a moment, she saw a faint reflection of Lily standing behind her, that empty gaze piercing through her. But in an instant, the reflection vanished. Rachel exhaled slowly, trying to calm herself. But her fear continued to grow, as if something far bigger was waiting, lurking in the darkness. Several days after the incident by the river, Rachel couldn't shake the bad feeling that kept haunting her. Every night, she felt something moving inside the house. Small objects like chairs or children's toys would suddenly be out of place. The bedroom door locked itself. Strange noises came from downstairs when everyone was already asleep. The culmination happened one night when Rachel was awakened by a loud creaking sound from below. Holding her breath, she grabbed a flashlight and cautiously went downstairs, hoping to find nothing more than a mouse or a small animal that had entered the house. But when she reached the living room, she saw something far worse. On the living room wall, scratch marks appeared, as if written by a small but rough hand. The scratches formed a single word, repeatedly written all over the walls: "Stay with me." Rachel backed away in terror. This wasn't her children's doing. And this wasn't something she could ignore anymore. There was something real and horrifying inside this house, something that wouldn't stop until she gave in. The next day, Rachel decided to go back to see Mrs. Wilkins, hoping for more answers. But when she arrived at the library, shocking news awaited her. Mrs. Wilkins had been found dead at her home the previous night, her face filled with fear. Rachel collapsed into a chair. It seemed Lily or something darker had warned her, and she had realized it too late. Now, no one could offer her guidance or help. Rachel knew she had to face this alone, but how? How could she fight something she couldn't see and couldn't explain? That night, Rachel decided to do something that might be insane. She would summon Lily's spirit again, hoping to speak with her directly. She returned to the river where Lily had disappeared, this time bringing candles and a summoning spell she had found in Mrs. Wilkins' remaining notebook. As the candles lit up, the cold night wind blew, making the flames flicker. The sound of dry leaves rustling in the trees created a haunting melody, as if the surroundings sensed what was about to happen. Rachel stood by the riverbank, gazing into the still water, then began to recite the spell. Not long after she spoke the final words, the atmosphere around her shifted drastically. The air became heavier, colder, and a foul, unfamiliar smell filled her nose. From the darkness, Rachel heard wet, small footsteps approaching. Then, Lily's figure emerged from between the trees, with her torn dress and pale body. "Lily," Rachel whispered, trying to hold back her fear. "What do you want from me?" Lily didn't answer. Instead, she just stared at Rachel with a strange smile, her hollow eyes filled with emptiness. Suddenly, from behind Lily, another figure appeared larger, darker, and far more terrifying than the spirit of a little girl. The figure looked like a shadow with glowing red eyes, glaring at Rachel with intense hatred. Rachel realized this was the entity that had been controlling Lily and all the strange events in her home. Rachel took a step back, but the entity moved quickly, grabbing her with an unseen force. Rachel's body felt stiff, as if being held by something she couldn't fight. However, in the final moments, Rachel saw Lily looking at her with a gaze full of sorrow, as if apologizing. In an instant, Lily charged toward the dark entity, sacrificing herself to save Rachel. A scream echoed, and the entity disappeared along with Lily, leaving Rachel collapsed on the ground, exhausted. Gasping for breath, Rachel realized it was all over. Lily was finally free, and Rachel could go home safely. But in her heart, she knew that Graysonville would always harbor hidden darkness, and who knows when something even worse would surface again. The terrifying night in Graysonville might be over, but this story reminds us that some secrets are best left undiscovered. Don't let your curiosity lead you into unexpected darkness. How about you? Are you brave enough to face the hidden secrets in your own town?